second question, she was searching a search area, and the dog started into one room, which was the kitchen of the house they were searching, and came back out. And the handler took that to mean that there was no hide. And she said that her assumption was wrong. And at what point do I insist that she checks the entire room? So this is a bigger question, and you have to answer it on several different levels. You have to answer it on a drive building level, and you have to answer it on a patterns level, and you have to answer it on a handling level. So let's start with drive. The dog should never tell you that there's no odor. I think that's something a lot of people do and believe, and it's something that I personally disagree with. The dog doesn't get to make that decision. The dog should keep hunting and hunting and hunting and hunting and hunting forever until you make them leave. If you stay in a room, the dog should keep searching that room. And the longer they go without finding a hide, the more intensely that they search. Now, let me put it to you in another way. A coyote is out hunting, or even a pet dog going to a park where he sees squirrels, right? Let's say it's a weird day, and there are no squirrels in the park, okay? And your dog's used to seeing squirrels there, and he's looking for the squirrels. At what point does your dog stop looking for squirrels? And I think if the dog has any amount of drive for finding squirrels, then you'll find that the dog never stops looking for squirrels. In fact, the longer that he doesn't find a squirrel, the more intensely he searches. That, to me, is the natural behavior of the dog, and that's what should be encouraged in nose work. So, when your dog tells you there's no hide, to me, red flag. This is a drive issue. The dog should never tell you there's no hide. The dog should only tell you, like, at best, oh my gosh, I can't find a hide. I don't know, it must be really hard, Mom, and they keep searching. Right? And it's your job as the handler to tell the dog, okay, we've been in here long enough. If there was a hide, you've missed it. We're moving to a new area. Okay? Now, let's talk about it in terms of a patterning. How long do you stay in an area before the handler decides to leave out? Patterns and handling kind of together. We've been talking in my classes, and we'll talk about this more on Patreon, about how do you create what I call a one-pass dog, which is a dog that you only have to make one pass of the environment. It's a risk, because when you only do one pass, you really risk missing a hide. But every pass you do after the first pass, you risk falsing, calling a false alert, especially once you get up to 4, 5, 6 passes. Now, one pass doesn't necessarily mean like zip through a room and then, okay, we're done. No, it means we're going to spend the time it takes to make sure we've covered each area before progressing to the next area. And how long does that take? Well, that's a really complicated question. How experienced is your dog? How complicated is the search area? What distractions exist in the search area that your dog has or hasn't been trained for? So let me just take this kitchen that we were talking about. This is a lived-in house. There are 4 dogs who live here, and their food bowls are all scattered on the floor of the kitchen. And just outside the kitchen is a living room that's carpeted with all their dog beds, and those dogs live there, right? So how regularly are you asking your dog to search a lived-in doggy area? If the answer is not very often, then you should make sure to double and triple check areas, right? Because of your lack of training, right? You just haven't worked that many lived-in areas. You should make sure in training to train in a lot of lived-in areas until that kind of distraction never distracts the dog. So now, if your answer is, yes, I've trained in lived-in areas, my dog never has a distraction problem, if they come into a doggy search area, they just go right to work. Right to work. Well, then we have to look at what kind of hide challenge was it. Is this a hide challenge that you've practiced in the past or not? And just for example, Is it an accessible hide? Is it inaccessible? Is it high? Is it low? Is it in a corner? Is it a threshold? And in this case, because I remember I was there for the kitchen hide. The hide was on a kitchen chair in the back of the kitchen, and it was up about, I don't know, 3 feet off the ground. So you have to say, okay, it was a hide that was 3 feet high, back in a tight space, surrounded by other chairs, so lots of pulling out a problem. How regularly have I seen that problem? If your answer is not very often, then that means you're probably either going to miss it or you have to do a lot of passes before you find it. And again, these are training problems, training errors. The answer really isn't stay in the area, because again, you're timed in a competition. You don't have time. So if you haven't trained for the problem of the trial, you are going to fail. That's just the reality of it. So you're saying that the dog started in the kitchen and came back out. So first off, I would say, did you really check? And if the dog didn't really check, then train him to be drive-y into the search area, so they don't want to just say, oh, that's good enough. And so, go until you're satisfied. And when your dog doesn't show interest and you've asked them to, okay, move on. Don't spend a lot of time, and don't be afraid to fail. Just go in, and if you miss a hide and you fail, great. That tells you what you need to be focusing your training time on. I really think part of this is a fear of failure. The more you get rid of that fear, the more you just say, I don't care about failure. I'm just going to go and try to do the best we can and learn from our failures. And I'm seeking out the edge of our ability. So when we fail, that's the best moment that it could be for me, because that tells me what I need to work on. That will answer your question. And for me, if I were working my dog in that kitchen, I would have at least made sure my dog got into all the corners. And if it was hard to get my dog in the corners, guess what? I'd be putting corner hides for a month. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Remember that it's hides that teach dogs, not handlers. Remember that the dog should be in charge of finding hides, and you should be in charge of clearing the search area. So the dog should keep looking until you say to move on. I think that that is something that's very important to my style of training. I may put both of these questions out at once, but this looks like it's going to be a 15-minute video, so I might split these 2 questions into 2 videos. But hope that really helps, and I hope if you have any other questions, or any of you have any questions, just send them on in and I'll get them done. Thank you.